that report. David Macdonald, he's a senior economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. David, good morning to you. So talk to us about this CEO to worker gap. Why has it reached this high?
Well, really, it's a story about bonus pay. It's not a story about salaries. Most Canadians are familiar with salaries, mixed salaries or a wage, and that is basically all their compensation. That's not the case for CEOs. Over 80% of CEO pay comes in the form of bonuses. And so average CEO pay this year was $13 million. 11 of that 13 is in the form of bonuses. And it's those bonuses that are driving the pay gap between average workers and CEO pay, not the salaries.
So bonuses and stock options. So I read you were quoted as saying a tear will be shed in boardrooms across Canada now that inflation seems to be over. CEOs haven't been impacted by inflation, have they?
Well, they certainly have been, but it's been great for them. This is the story of inflation. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity for the corporate world to raise prices rapidly, causing inflation, but also causing record profits. These bonuses that CEOs get paid are related to company performance. And so if you see profits and revenues of a company go through the roof, then CEO pay goes through the roof as well. And so once inflation comes back down, this has reduced corporate profits. They're still very high, historically speaking, but not at the historic levels that we saw in 21 and 22. And so as a result, the bonuses are slightly lower as well for CEOs because they're related to those profit margins. So we're not quite at historic highs for CEOs, a little bit lower than 21 and 22, still pretty high, but inflation was great for CEO profits. On the other hand, for average workers, it was pretty bad. One of the things we are seeing this year, and one of the positive signs, is that workers have seen a pay increase of almost 7%, clawing their way back, in essence, from the increase in the costs of those goods and services that drove the profits.
So the number one spot went to the CEO of GFL Environmental. Second place, the Restaurant Brands International CEO. Before we run out of time, I do have to ask you about the title of this report and the real shortage of women that we see listed as being among the top earners. Your thoughts on that, please.
Only 3 women out of 100, 3 CEOs, out of 100 that are women. There's actually more men named Scott on the list than there are women in total. The other thing about company men that's worth saying is that there's often this argument that CEOs need to be paid these extravagant amounts because there's this big international competition for them. That's a fascinating story and an interesting fable. It's not actually how CEOs are hired, though. Of these top CEOs, 3/4 of them were not hired directly into the CEO chair. They were hired into a subordinate position. And on average, they spent 21 years with the company that they head. And so, in essence, they're company men. They worked their way up. These are internal hires. It's not part of some big international competition for CEOs. These are just folks who know the company really well, and that's why they're heading it at the end of their careers. And so the extraordinary bonuses that they say are required, not really required if you're just doing internal hires.
David Macdonald, he is a senior economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Thanks so much for your time on this report.